Before we get going, I want to talk about the format of this video and how I intend to present it. When I started this idea, I was initially looking for an endurance test, and the artworks of the macabre subject appealed to me. I did very little research on the Caretaker, the album, or the subject matter. I was under the impression I was going to be listening to a really long ambient collection made by an amateur music artist trying to be a lot deeper and a little bit more morbid than he is probably prepared to be. And I'd get the opportunity to flex my YouTube commentary chops and getting to talk about some sick music, right? About an hour or two into the project, I realized I had stumbled upon probably one of the most musically profound experiences I've ever had in my life. Regrettably, the first few stages, I was a bit more jovial than I should have been. I don't want to remove these initial sections of recordings because they are authentic and they are how I originally first felt when I listened to the project. All I ask is that if you've decided to watch the rest of the video and this is a sensitive topic for you, please understand I'm not trying to make less of the themes of this beautiful piece of art or dementia. I'll have all sources to anything that I feel is appropriate to backing up my opinions or beliefs on the art and the music in the description below. Any YouTubers I reference, and of course the music that we're listening to. As you may have noticed, I do have my script here. This is just because I'm an awful commentator. I'm awful at reading or at just talking. To keep myself on track with the ideas that I have, I've written the script. It's not to be disingenuous or because I don't actually feel these things. Without a script, my talking sounds like the ramblings of a madman. So this is to help us both. I hope you can forgive me. Let's get started. If I had a direct family member or friend suffering from dementia, this would have profoundly disturbed me. I listened to this project 3 times. Once, one full entire listen through, and the other 2 I was sort of bouncing around important moments in the album that I felt were important, but also without trying to lose the context of why those moments were important. The latter of which I felt a much greater weight after understanding, one, the subject matter of what the project is about, and ultimately knowing where the project ends is a lot. It's a lot more profound to go back and listen to the beginning once you know where the project sort of ends. I feel in a very deep and sad and dark way, I've gained an inkling of an idea of what emotion someone would go through being or watching someone slip into and be overcome by dementia. Thinking analytically, the emotions I felt are a direct result of Leland Kirby, his creation process on this project. His goals were to hide the listener from feeling the process and provide them with the experience, which in my opinion he absolutely nails. The entire project feels organic, like the music is deteriorating the way my mind would naturally as a living being. Hiding the digital feeling of creation that sometimes can seep through a project meant to feel this organic. I'd like to go through each stage individually with you. First showing you my initial reaction as unedited as I possibly can. Those madman ramblings I will try my best to edit out because my first listen through I didn't script myself at all. I just sat there and talked about it. And then a more comprehensive commentary after I listened to twice more to really pull the message and the experience that was intended, what I feel was intended for us to get from this experience. I'm going to try to use the 7 stages of dementia as a vehicle to go through these albums with you because I do think that was the intention of having 6. But to keep with the naming scheme of Everywhere at the End of Time, I'll be renaming the medical stages as the album stages. Technically, there are 7 stages of dementia, and we only have 6 albums. The way I'm going to do it's going to make sense. Trust me. This is the stage of dementia, more than likely, hopefully, you are in. There are no symptoms or memory loss, and as such, no musical accompaniment. I like to think this was on purpose, as if Leland Kirby were to say, the music you listen to on your way home, or at work, or just whatever you were listening to previous to this, is your stage 0. Here we experience the first signs of memory loss. This stage is most like a beautiful daydream, the glory of old age and recollection, the last of the great days. So that was stage 1. That was the description it gives with stage 1. It just sounds like really floaty, old music played through a record player. So any imperfections, I feel like, could be explained away by the record player, like the vinyl effect. You hear the scratches and bumps throughout the whole 40 minutes. But I mean, there were parts where things were like stretching and like strings would be a little bit sharper than you think they should be, but I feel like that's normal on a record player, so I might be looking like too deep into it. But it also said that this is where the memory loss begins. So with the intention of the album, I think that's what he was trying to do there. But yeah, I don't know, nothing incredible. Like if you were to listen to any random collection of just one-off old 1920s music, I feel like any Lawrence Welk-esque music, I think that's what you'd expect to hear. Very uneventful, I feel. Here the mind is starting to deteriorate, but it's not obvious to you or anyone around you. The album reflects that. The musical ideas are fully formed and complete. The only repetition is intentional. There are a few distortions, cracking, and fuzziness, but some jerk just forgot to clean the needle on the record player. The second stage is the self-realization and awareness that something is wrong, with a refusal to accept that. More effort is made to remember, so memories can be more long-form, with a little more deterioration in quality. The overall personal mood is generally lower than the first stage, and at a point before confusion starts setting in. So immediately that stage 2 is darker, much darker. At least it starts really, at least for me, it was really eerie. It sounded like I was just learning of what was happening to me. It starts off with like this what sounds like a train, like a, but if you put that sound through like a fuzz guitar pedal, like a real, I don't know, you'd have to listen to it. The beginning of stage 2, it sounds real fuzzy, but if the fuzz was like a train sound through a fuzz pedal. And it also, like, these really ethereal, I think all of the backing tracks, instead of sounding like horns or sounding like flutes, it's just one ethereal sound that's kind of rising, and all the songs end with like this really eerie reverb effect until the next one begins. Like, but whereas before all the songs sort of had an ending, they had an end point, now they all just kind of end. You're not really sure where, I suppose. I don't know. That could be looking way too far into it. I wanted to say beforehand also, just to touch on the original songs, the titles were really happy, and they sounded happy for the most part. The stage 2 immediately starts with a song called a losing battle is raging, and I don't know, the rest of the song sort of follows suit, like the song Surrendering in Despair, which I'm pretty sure is just Away in a Manger, like the church Christmas song, but like cut differently. It was weird. I felt like I recognized that song. Like it sounds like Away in a Manger, but jumbled up. Notes are starting to get held for longer than I feel like they should. Like it's no longer like a whole note. It's like a whole note and a half. And I don't know. It's pretty neat. There are parts of each song where the weirdness will sort of break. It'll be normal. I'm pretty sure they repeated a song too, like a song from the first stage, but it was much, much darker here. I don't know. My conclusion is it's a lot darker. It's a lot creepier. There's a lot more emotion, I feel. Like it feels a lot more emotional. It feels a lot more distress. Difficulty concentrating, decreased performance. Something is wrong. You're not remembering how you got where you are. You're starting to notice, and so does everyone around you. The record cracking we heard in stage 1 is at the forefront into. A lot of the time it's difficult to focus on much else. The music also has taken a much more lethargic and moody tone. The musical ideas are still intact and defined, though they are becoming more abstract, without feeling like they complete naturally and just fade away into the next track. Stage 3. Here we are presented with some of the last coherent memories before confusion fully rolls in, and the gray mists form and fade away. Finest moments have been remembered. The musical flow in places is more confused and tangled. As we progress, some singular memories become more disturbed, isolated, broken, and distant. These are the last embers of awareness before we enter the post-awareness stages. So stage 3 starts off with a very strong and disorienting reverb. It's really hard not to focus on the reverb, I guess. It's really disorienting. Like it's just difficult to focus on the music with that reverb there, because it's stacking on top of each other. So like a horn will play and you'll hear that horn again and that horn again and that horn again, but the original song is still gone on and there's reverbs of each of those horns. So it's just really disorienting, like really difficult to sort of piece together the exact melody. It starts off really strong in the beginning, but it does sort of fade away, less so later into stage 3. A lot of the songs are ending really abruptly. Like it's really disturbing for me, just because I'm in an office. I work at night. I'm in an office. Most of the lights except for the one in this room are off, so I'll be working over there on the test bench, just playing around, and then I'll be listening to this ambient, creepy ambient almost music, and then it'll stop. It'll cut immediately, and we'll jump almost halfway into another intro, or another song's intro, and it's just really jarring. Like when you're focusing on the music, you almost feel it physically, that cut happening, and it's scary. You feel like there's a lot of energy now. Something else has happened, and then that song will slowly descend into its weird, creepy ambient music, and then sometimes, like a couple times on the record, or a couple times on the stage, it just keeps flowing until there's nothing left, and other times it'll just cut again abruptly into some other intro of some other song. It's really weird. I was constantly checking just to see if was that the same song or was that it cutting to the next song. And sometimes it's the same song. It's really strange. It's a really weird feeling. There's also this. It sounds like much like the train with the fuzz pedal at the beginning. There's like it feels like rain, and then it fades into fire crackling, and then maybe something else, and it feels like those sounds are being put through a fuzz pedal. So it's really, but like rain, fire crackles. I don't know, but it's starting to feel like those are coming more forwards. Like that's becoming the focus of the song, and the music is in the background. Like you're not really supposed to be paying attention to the music. You're supposed to be paying attention to these really weird, fuzzy, crackly sounds. And we're starting to leave what sounds like traditional music. And towards the end of this stage, it sounds very much like a creepy, eerie, ambient, like an ambient sound. It doesn't feel like a traditional music sound like we started with 1920s, 1930s horn, big band, ensemble music. We're very much in strange, creepy music now. Oh, there's also there's the song titles in stage 3. The song titles in stage 3 are they're just as like sad. They're just as, I don't really know the word, not angsty, but like definitely alluding to a sad stage. But there's also a lot of nods to Benjamin LeBay. Benjamin LeBay, who was I actually googled him. No, but he was like a guy who studied consciousness, and I thought that was cool. Just a lot of nods to him here. So I wonder if maybe the person we're supposed to be watching go through this or feeling go through this is maybe starting to research Benjamin LeBay. I don't know. I just noticed there was a lot of references and I thought it was cool.
Concentrating is very difficult. Everyday chores are becoming confusing and you just can't seem to get it right. It's very, very hard to tell family that you love them. How is this possible? Your thoughts and actions are ending abruptly and you find yourself in places around people you don't recognize. Leland did an incredible job showing the feeling on this opening track with the reverb. I had a very hard time thinking about what I was hearing. If the music represents my consciousness and the fuzz, static, cracking represents the disease or the growth of the disease, then I feel like the reverb and echoes represent the confusion and the lack of focus and deterioration of the character. The allusions to Benjamin LeBay and his work Neuroscience of the Free Will is very intentionally and ominously on the nose. I believe Leland is trying to tell us that the only tasks the character can perform are the ones their brain doesn't need any help to make, and they have significantly less control over the world around them. They can tie their shoes, they can, unlock their car, they can put on their shoes and whatnot, but things that require them to think about it, like trying to find their way home, it's getting more tough. Post-awareness stage 4 is where serenity and the ability to recall singular memories gives way to confusions and horror. It's the beginning of an eventual process where all memories begin to become more fluid through entanglements, repetition, and rupture.
So there's no longer any songs, any individual songs. So I think I'm just going to talk about each individual section of the stage. Or sorta, I guess, because the first 2 stages are called post-awareness confusions. 1 and 2, they're not even numbered on the, well, I guess they are kind of numbered. This is G1 and H1, but they're both pretty similar. Maybe not, but But it's not hard to make out the music that it's trying to show me. Jeez, this is gonna be tough. I have a hard enough time explaining what I'm thinking of without it being such an abstract piece of art. Trying to explain how I'm feeling about such an abstract piece of art. But it's not hard to make out the music. You can still very much hear it, but it sounds like if there's a record player, it sounds like you're in a cave with a record player, and 20 feet in front of the record player is a radio that's just blaring static, and it's slowly shifting in between static channels, and then you're 3 feet in front of the radio. So if the static quiets down for just a minute, then you can clearly hear the music 20 feet away. But so the music hasn't stopped; it's still going, but there's just this awful fuzzy static, and there's no more. It doesn't sound like a train, or it doesn't sound like rain or fire crackling that's been put through a pedal anymore. It sounds like radio static. So huge development there. A lot has changed. Let's see. I made a couple notes just because I didn't want to have a script, but there's a lot to go into now as the songs are turning, each individual track is becoming 20, 30 minutes long. So yeah, the first two post-awareness confusions are pretty similar though. So the song will play this motif or play this rhythm or melody, but it jumps them up, it splits them in between areas, and it doesn't feel like you're getting past this motif or past this musical idea. You're kind of just skipping through them without any sort of order, and then you stop, and then you skip through them again, and then you stop, and it's the same. And as soon as you feel like the song is progressing, you're gonna get further down the line with this idea, the whole thing dissolves back into fuzz and static and just a mess. I feel like if I'm trying to be getting anything, if I'm trying to read into it really hard or decode it, I feel like what I'm being told is that I feel like in this stage I'm trying really hard to remember. Like that's the character I'm being told to play right now, is someone who's really trying hard to remember what's happening, like trying to remember the music, but it's so hard and it's not clear, and then as soon as I stop trying, everything goes away. It's just static in a cave is what it sounds like. There are extreme bursts of very clear, like one note song. So if you try really hard to remember, there's a quick fanfare for 2 or 3 seconds and then it's gone. Third section of that stage is called temporary bliss. Why is my It's called temporary bliss, and it is not blissful. It is the furthest thing from being blissful. It's the same staticky radio sound, but it has this like music box that's playing and skipping through. Like you'll hear the music box, and then it sort of gets overwhelmed with this ethereal choir sound, and then the music box will fade back in, but through the whole track you're trying to hear it through this radio static. And then it switches back to an awareness confusions 4, which is 3, which is the fourth and last track on that stage. And this one gets a lot darker. Like the first two, it felt like I was really trying to hear this music, like I was a character trying to find this music in my head, and it was really cloudy. And this one, there's a lot less music. It's a lot more radio static, and sometimes the music will fade in and out like it did on the first two, but other times there's a person screaming that's fading out, like a Doppler effect person that's screaming. And there's also this fuzzy, like a gong that's been through a fuzz pedal kind of now, where usually if you hear the person screaming, then the fuzzy gong will hit a couple times, like a guy really wailing on a gong or something. It's pretty. It's this one got really weird. Like the other couple, like I could identify with, like I could really feel the emotions I was meant to feel. Like if I was supposed to feel sad or angry, or frustrated, the music, the choice, the song choice really reflected that. Like I felt happy, I felt sad, I felt I felt what the artist wanted me to feel. Here I feel probably what the artist wants me to feel, but it's very confused. I don't understand. Maybe that's just a thing with dementia. I don't know. I don't know if this artist, I'll do a little research afterwards. I don't know if this artist knows someone who has suffered from dementia, and that was the I'm sure that's the inspiration for this song. Maybe it's just something he cares passionately about. There's nothing to identify with this. It's very different. We're on the stage 5 minutes. I really don't know what to expect from stage 5, because stage 4 was such a departure from anything I could have recognized. Let's see. Let's get into it. I think I don't know.
Frustration, anger, and fear. Sometimes we aren't sure why. Other times we're thrust into these feelings. People around us ask for information we don't understand, questions full of words we don't recognize. Stage 4 is very overwhelming. I think we're being shown this character really struggle with who they are. They are still aware of their surroundings, but they know there are vital pieces of information and context that are missing. The fuzz has completely taken over, and it's starting to create its own patterns, while musical ideas are completely jumbled and repeat randomly, almost like we're stuck on very simple thoughts, even when there is a lull in the nonsensical sounds and we have a moment of recognition. It's distorted in a way where it's hard to tell if it's the same motifs we've heard before. Post-awareness stage 5. Confusions and horror. More extreme entanglements, repetition, and rupture can give way to calmer moments. The unfamiliar may sound familiar. Time is often spent only in the moment, leading to isolation.
I feel like stage 5 had the most change, like the most, I don't even know. I feel like stage 5 was the most dynamic over its stage. Like, I feel like a lot changed within stage 5. The fuzzy sound, the fuzzy static sound got very sharp. Like, if you could put it into Photoshop and raise the sharpness of it as an image, it would be deep fried. It was super sharp. Like, it sounded like wet, like if you had a bucket of water and you poured it onto wet grass, like that sound, but continuous, and you like just turned the gain way up a lot. In the first section, called advanced plaque enlargements, a lot of the music I don't feel like was the music we've listened to. It hasn't been the same ballroom ensemble big band music. A lot of it it's been like tribal drums. It's been someone on the radio talking. A lot of like non-brass, like natural sounding horns, like Lord of the Rings goat horns. There were brass horns in there too though, but in the second plaque enlargement section. The background music is a lot more cohesive. Like, it's like we're back in that cave with the radio in front of us and the record player much farther behind us, or much farther away from us. But it sounds like the musical ideas that we're hearing in the background aren't connected with one another. Like, we hear the horns from one song and the flute from another, and the singing from another song. Like, they don't feel like it's one song anymore that we're hearing behind all the static. And also, something I noticed is in the fuzz there's been like a pattern, like the train or the rain or the crackling fire, but now those patterns are starting to get broken up by more fuzz. Like, the less violent fuzz is coming in and sort of dissolving the sharp fuzz, making it so not even that sort of has a beat or a rhythm to it anymore. In Synapse Retrogenesis, it's a lot closer to an ambient song, of like an electronic ambient song with like a pulse surging synth melody. It was really strange to come to that sound after listening to radio static drowned music or drowned noise for so long. It almost felt like it was really strange. Just going back to something that could be considered more music than experience. But that didn't last too long. After 8 minutes of that ambient atmosphere, it was dissolved away again by a pretty violent and very active moving around radio static fuzz sound. And that song sort of ended more like, sort of slowly developed into something more like the ballroom music, but still with different identities, different musical identities. That one was really strange. Synapse Retrogenesis was a wild one. Time separation into isolation. The fuzz, the static on the static there sounded like it was screaming. Like, it was a very violent, very sharp, angry fuzz. It brought back the brass horns. Like, we could hear the brass horns again, but they almost melted into like a train passing you sound. The musical ideas are pretty clear, along with the fuzz, but the musical ideas hardly get more than a second or two to really happen before it's interrupted by fuzz and then repeated. And it's repeated ad nauseum until it's like repeating and repeating and repeating until they give up. The character that we're following gives up and then tries a new idea, and then it barely gets a second before it's interrupted, repeats, and that goes on for a long time until it gets repeated and repeated until it's interrupted by either louder fuzz or this eerie bout of like silence for like 2 seconds. And then towards the end of this whole stage, it really fades strangely into like nothing. Fades into almost silence with minimal static. Like, it's an obscene amount of static, but very small amount of static at the end compared to what we've been listening to so far.
I feel it would be disingenuous to keep up with the poetry acting junk from here on out. Having only experienced this mental catastrophe from behind the second hand, I wouldn't feel right trying to represent it in the first hand. But we will keep pushing forward into stage 5 and 6 and how I interpreted them analytically and emotionally. I just wanted to make it clear that from here on out, I don't know how to feel. The fuzz is more distorted than it has been yet on stage 5. It's completely taken over again. This time, however, the recognizable sounds and tones can only be heard for a fraction of a second, leading to wailing or swelling instead of any kind of musical idea. With that being said, there are a few exceptions where we can faintly hear fading melody hiding behind all the static. The idea that shocked me the most here was the inclusion of genres of music we really haven't heard here before. And those very unfamiliar melodies and sounds and musical ideas are the most recognizable pieces of stage 5. And it's really jarring just being almost a complete genre shift, almost like this person's entire mentality has changed. I believe what Leland is trying to have us experience is the transition from someone who can only live in the moment, whose disease has almost destroyed everything that has made their experience on this planet unique, into a person who's officially lost all that and whose experiences now are new and frighteningly foreign all the time. Stage 5 starts with a seemingly random assortment of sound similar to which we left off on stage 4, and slowly devolves into the middle section of the record where there's significantly less activity. The static is repeating itself still, as if implying we aren't getting what we don't understand wrong. I also think the reverb in this section quits representing the confusion it did earlier and begins to take on the feeling of hollowness and loneliness. Arriving at the end and by the finish of the final section, it's pretty clear as the static and random sound wind down that there's very little coherent and meaningful thought left. Post-awareness, stage 6, is without description. Okay. So, a lack, a confusion so thick, you forget you're forgetting. That's the first 20-minute track, and there really isn't anything too incredibly musical about it. We're just sort of back to the very low, dulling amount of fuzz. It's not super distorted or anything, it's just subtle, takes over everything. The song that's behind it is so stretched out you really can't hear anything. A brutal bliss beyond this empty defeat. The fuzz here is a lot louder, but it kind of sounds like the fuzz is sort of emulating waves washing on a beach. It's not distorted or distracting, really. It's just providing for the ambiance. The music now is fast enough where you can hear the notes switching, and it's picked up a bit. It's less of one continuous tone. You can hear that there's a progression being made. The song that's playing also is ominous and grandiose. It feels final. Kind of sounds like something that would be played during like a game where the character is finally getting to rest and he's like floating in space or in a pool. And there's a part where the ballroom music kind of comes back, and it's very clear. We can hear that ballroom music that we heard in the first stage, but it feels flat. Like that, it is changing notes. We can hear the music clearly, but it doesn't sound like it's leaving a certain note. It just sounds like they're splitting up the notes. Very flat. They're changing notes, and then that song just sort of ends. It just sort of cuts off.
The next song is The Long Decline Is Over, and it begins pretty close to how the last song ended. It's, you know, there's this swell, the fuzz is beachy almost, like waves. But we get these horns, these horn fanfares, and these quick little piano licks, and the character is returning. Like there is, you can tell it's different notes that are being played. And then towards the middle, it just stops. It stops and it's quiet, and then it comes in with like these drums, like real bassy drums, giving you a drum roll, and then it'll stop. And then as soon as that reverb is almost over, then it'll play a quick little bit of piano. And then as soon as that reverb is almost over, it'll go back to the drums. And then once that reverb is almost over, it'll play something else. And that sort of continues until the end of that section. Like there's a good 10 minutes of that. And with each addition, it gets just a little bit more complex. Like things are starting to come back for the character. My notes say I am on the edge of my seat. The next song is A Place in the World Fades Away. And this one too starts pretty similar to how the previous one ended. It's difficult to really hear individual notes, but you do hear it switch. Instead of playing the notes, they just sort of swell up. Halfway through this one, the song again quickly cuts to almost nothing but silence, and then like a huge payoff for the end of the album, and then the last 60 seconds of the stage is just complete silence. No more vinyl scratching, nothing. It's over. That's the end.
This stage has no description. That phrase has turned into a bit of a meme in the comments of the video, but narratively it makes sense to me. According to the stage descriptions we've been seeing from the DementiaCareCentral.com, by the time we've reached this point, our character is very far gone. They've lost the ability to communicate, move in any significant way, and really any means of expressing what it is they are experiencing. So our author is left to sort of speculate as to how to present what's going on in their mind. I can't find any sources to confirm or deny how I feel here. So for a second time, please understand I am and have been talking with no authority, and this is just my interpretation of the art and the information I've been able to find. Confusion so thick you forget what you're forgetting, and A Beautiful Bliss Beyond This Empty Defeat are both very empty, windy feeling tracks with a few musical moments outside of the blips and bleeps and one very short fanfare of horns. These are experiences that emulate exactly how I'd imagine this stage of dementia. In the third section, The Long Decline Is Over, we begin with a similar silence or absence of anything meaningful, but very quickly we begin to hear a very slow swelling and distant echoey horn, which turns into other instruments and periodically becomes a low silence, where it feels like our character is experiencing their last moments, as the in-between of sounds aren't filled with static or fuzz any longer, but with silence and the possible faint reverberation of the previous thought if it was significant enough. Towards the end of the track, the pattern does bounce back, however, and the notes and licks become a little bit more frequent and vivid. This is where I get a little speculative, but I'm going to keep going because I'm very along for the ride, and I've been pretty moved by the story so far. The final section, Place in the World Fades Away, wraps up the project and is pretty heavy. The track begins with silence, and periodically we hear a few ethereal sounding swells like we have been before on the last two tracks. However, around the 6 minute mark, things begin to get very vibrant, and they don't really let up like the previous tracks did. Closer to the end, these swellings and releasing of chords sound relaxing and final. And once they do release for the last time, we have silence. And like a light switch, a you know, I can't give this away, right? Seriously, this is a very beautiful and somber moment on the entire 6.5 hour series so far, and I at the very least recommend listening to a few tracks on each album, soak in its ambience, really try and experience what it's trying to tell you, and then listen to the last 7 minutes on A Place in the World Fades Away. This has been by far the most profound and emotional experience I've ever had with music, and with most other mediums of art. I was not bored or restless during any of my listens, although I personally feel the last track is a bit romanticized and maybe a tad optimistic, either for creative reasons or just personal ones. Uh, he probably didn't want to leave his 6.5 hour masterpiece on the same sour, fleeting, awful mental note that we had been sitting on for like 3 hours. Anyhow, there wasn't a moment where I felt a second of this project was sacrificed or wasted to not serve the narrative that the artist was trying to give us. I felt pretty much every second of that 6.5 hour adventure was pretty important. Really trying to digest this entire project was a mental exercise and an emotional roller coaster. Definitely rose above that endurance test that I really was looking for at the beginning. I can't even begin to imagine the process for making a piece of art like this, like the technique, the understanding of how all your equipment works in a way to make it sound like you aren't using it. And I don't believe, outside of experiencing dementia for myself, there could be a more passionately made or accurate feeling touchstone to this experience. For this video, and for our beloved character, I'd like to end this video with probably the most beautiful moment I've experienced in cinema. And it's from a cheesy cowboy movie my grandpa showed me, so please enjoy. I hope this doesn't sound like shit.